I'm like you. I'm no better than you. I cannot, you've never seen me read a speech because I cannot read a speech.
No, Gavin, you're not just like us, because we are not multi-millionaire celebrity governors who married into money. Like, it's just, I find it to be condescending and annoying. We've got a story that's truly going to live up to the name of this show. It's going to be Brad versus everyone, because nobody's going to like my take on this. I have smoke for everybody. I'm trying to be fair. I'm trying to be consistent, but nobody is going to like what I have to say. First, let me kind of set the scene of this story for you. So we've got an out-of-context clip that went viral on Twitter, making accusations of bigotry against a political opponent. The Twitter pylon starts, people come out of the woodworks. First it's on social media, but then it breaks through to mainstream media, and even members of Congress are condemning the person who said the very offensive, racist thing, according to this narrative that blew up across the internet. But then, a little bit later, quietly, without much fanfare, some facts come out that reveal the underlying accusation that originally went viral doesn't actually make sense and wasn't true, and essentially debunks the whole thing. But very, very few people bother to update their statements, correct the narrative, or issue any kind of apology. Does this sound familiar to you? Because if you've been following this show, or if you followed politics throughout the 2020s, it probably should. We all lived through the Covington Catholic smear of that student and so many other essentially like fake or misleading or weaponized cancel culture, woke culture, kind of racism takedowns or bigotry accusations that went viral. But this time we're not actually talking about that. We're talking about the latest Republican crusade against the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. Yeah, seriously, it's kind of an epic role reversal here, in my opinion, and I'm going to give you the details. And essentially, we're gonna walk through this. It all started when Newsom went to Atlanta for an event about his new book. That's clearly, if you ask me, low key, kind of a preview for his presidential campaign, where he says that he's not running for president, but we all know he's running for president. He wants to be the next president. He's trying to frame himself as this like tough liberal champion who's not politically correct and is reasonable and is just like you, but is ready to fight Trump and all of this. But so he spoke at this event in Atlanta that was moderated by the mayor of Atlanta, who is worth noting is a black Democrat. And then what happened was a tiny little bit of his remarks got clipped up and put out by the right-wing Twitter account End Wokeness, which has millions of followers. They pulled this 38-second clip of Newsom talking, and they essentially, here's what they wrote as the caption. Governor Newsom to a black crowd in Georgia, quote, "I am like you. I am a 960 SAT guy. I can't read." Now, that's not actually a correct quote. He said in the actual video that they attached, he said that he struggles to read speeches, like from a teleprompter. Gavin Newsom can read and does not claim to not be able to read, but he says that he has struggled with dyslexia, and he said that many times over the years, so he struggles to read speeches, like written speeches, or use a teleprompter. But anyway, obviously, if this was true at face value, if Gavin Newsom was pandering to a room full of black people by saying, "I'm just like you, I got low test scores and struggle with reading," that would be like insanely racist and condescending. And it would be, to be honest, we've seen Democratic politicians make statements like that in the past. It would be absolutely offensive and worthy of a lot of the outrage that it's received if he did make that kind of a statement. But the story is a lot more complicated. Anyway, here is that clip so you can listen to yourself what Gavin Newsom said that was then clipped up and spread like wildfire by this End Wokeness account. His tweet has now over 52 million views. That is an astronomical number. Anyway, here's that clip.
I'm not trying to impress you. I'm just trying to impress upon you. I'm like you. I'm no better than you. I'm a 960 SAT guy. And, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, trying to act all there if you got 940. But literally a 960 SAT guy. I cannot, you've never seen me read a speech because I cannot read a speech. Maybe the wrong business to be in.
So I have a lot of things to say about this clip, and frankly, most of them are negative. I am not a Gavin Newsom fan. I'm actually a huge critic of him. I think basically he has governed California poorly. I think he's a total snake who doesn't really have underlying beliefs and just wants to glom on to power. And I think he's pushed forward some really toxic and radical policies in California when it comes to gender, COVID, and beyond. So I've been a critic of him for years. And I even find this shtick that he does, I'm just like you, I have a low SAT score and I struggle with reading, is obviously he's trying to pander. It comes off as fake because no, Gavin, you're not just like us, because we are not multi-millionaire celebrity governors who married into money. Like, it's just, I find it to be condescending and annoying. But is it racist? That is the narrative that people went with. Immediately, this narrative blew up that Gavin Newsom had condescendingly racially insulted a room full of black people. So here are some viral posts making this allegation. Nicki Minaj, the newly crowned MAGA champion, wrote on X, his way of bonding with black people is to tell them how stupid he is and that he can't read. This means my first read on him was correct. He's been handed so many things and put in high positions he never earned or deserved. Megyn Kelly shared the N-wokeness version of of events that said Gavin Newsom said this to a black crowd in Georgia and wrote, "This clip will haunt him forever." Now, this one is my personal favorite example. Benny Johnson, the MAGA YouTuber, who, if you don't know this, was actually a serial plagiarist and got fired from a bunch of jobs, or at least one major job in his journalism career, but is now kind of a MAGA YouTube star. He posted a video claiming that Gavin Newsom ends his career at black campaign event. And the reason I have to show you this, if you're listening on audio podcast feed, I have to describe this to you. It's one of the most bizarre AI slop images I've ever seen. Benny Johnson had his team put together a photo of Gavin Newsom in a do-rag holding up watermelon and fried chicken while surrounded by black men who are yelling at him, and put the text as, "He's done." So Gavin Newsom is a racist pandering to black people who just ended his career at a black campaign event. Now, it was not just influencers and online pundits and YouTubers who ran with this narrative. Members of Congress got in on the act, including people like Senator Tim Scott, who is, of course, a black Republican. Here he is on Fox News. Listen to this.
The entire country should stand up to Gavin Newsom. What we saw one more time is Gavin Newsom bringing out the tired old raggedy race card and trying to say that black people are dumb, ignorant, and they can't read. They must score really low on the SAT score. Here's a guy who wants to be president of the United States he doesn't even believe in Americans.
Now, like I said, I am more than open to criticisms of Gavin Newsom of all sorts, really. But I did not buy this narrative for a few reasons. Immediately, I got suspicious and kind of was on guard about it. Then when I looked into it, it totally fell apart. So the first problem with this viral racism narrative is that it essentially relies on this idea that he made this remark to a room full of black people, or that his comment was in some way addressed to black people rather than just to the general public, saying, "I'm just like you, I'm an average guy, I got a below average SAT score," because that in and of itself isn't racist. Like, he didn't mention race in the clip. But if he was speaking directly to an audience that was like 95% black people, then you could infer that that was maybe a statement intended to speak to black Americans. And that's how it was portrayed by N-wokeness. And apparently just no one bothered to check. They just took this random anonymous Twitter account at face value. And maybe because it was Atlanta, they just assumed it was a black audience, because Atlanta's population is roughly half black. But Gavin Newsom actually does not, in fact, pull enormous amounts of black people in terms of his supporters. He has some, but photos that were posted by the mayor of the actual event, I'll put those on screen here, show, I mean, the room, I could go ahead and count the white people, but it is at least a heavily mixed audience. I would say it looks to be majority white, but this is not a black audience. This is not a black campaign event. That is not true. It was just a general book event, and there are tons and tons of white people in attendance. So he was not specifically speaking to black people, and he also wasn't actually speaking to the actual interviewer either, because some people have said that oh well, he was speaking to the black mayor and he was saying that to him. That is also not true. And in fact, when Gavin Newsom made his kind of cringeworthy pandering comment about I'm just like you, I've got the low SAT score, it was actually directed generically towards the readers of his book that he was discussing. And we know this because if you go back and actually watch the video, the question that the moderator, who's the mayor, asked him was specifically the question that precipitated this remark that's gone viral, was specifically, what do you want readers of the book to know about you? And so then he responds for several minutes and eventually gets to this tirade that Ann Wokeness, this Twitter account, then clipped without, very deceptively clipped, without the context of the actual question. Here is the actual question itself. I'll play this clip for you now.
Yeah, so those of you that are in the room with your mom, hug them tight. But what would you like for us to take away from that? What would you like for the reader to know more intimately about you and how those two separate lives that you had together and the tough decisions you made and the risk that you had to take, and even growing up with dyslexia and all that, like, what do you want us to take from that and where you are today?
So that is the question. You just heard it there. That is the question that prompted this multi-minute response where Gavin eventually made these. The question was, what do you want the reader, or us, as in the people reading this book, this was a book event, to know about you or to take away about you because of your dyslexia and your journey? And then Gavin goes into his whole shtick about, I'm just an everyday Joe, which again, I think is bull. But is it racist? Obviously not. This book is not intended for black audiences or anything. It's a general interest book at a general interest event that was a mixed race community. So it's essentially, it's like very bizarre for me to find myself in this situation where I'm defending Gavin Newsom. But I spent years, and so did almost all of these people who are now joining in on this Twitter mob campaign, pushing back on the weaponization of accusations of bigotry and out of context quotes to try to gin up internet mobs, to cancel people or punish people because, you want to take them down for other reasons that are political or ideological. I called BS on that for years. I've always viewed that as incredibly dishonest and illiberal. But now suddenly many of the people who were with me on that are doing exactly this to Gavin Newsom. And I have no love lost for the man. Frankly, I abhor most of what he stands for politically, but I try to just be fair. I try to look at things from an honest perspective. And to me, there is just, when you actually look at the full facts and context of this incident, there is no way to claim seriously that this was some kind of racist remark or insult to black Americans. It simply was not. That is my honest takeaway, having reviewed this all in the spirit of fairness. And I will say that if he had, one other piece of this I should mention is that Newsom has said, not this exact line, but he has said variations of this where he talks about his SAT score and kind of belittles himself and says he's just an average guy. He said it in many interviews, including on the Charlie Kirk podcast. So it's hard for me to see how something could be a slight, even if he had been speaking to a black audience, which again, he wasn't. Even if he had been, it's hard for me to see how that could be a racial slight when he says that to different audiences as well. Do you see how all of this seems to almost be like the same kind of unreasonable standards that were imposed by the woke left and the damned if you do, damned if you don't? Suddenly MAGA Twitter is doing it. I can't be the only one who feels disoriented by this. But anyway, the other piece of this that we do have to talk about, just in the spirit of honesty and nonpartisanship, is that if you're somebody like many of these people who enthusiastically supports President Trump and thinks he doesn't have a racist bone in his body, yet you are totally pearl clutching over Gavin Newsom's perceived comments to black people, which were not actually comments to black people at all. There is a double standard there. And the standard is that Trump, while actually speaking to black audiences, has said arguably more offensive things. And I feel like you do have to be consistent on this. So I want to play you a clip of Donald Trump specifically speaking at the Black Conservative Federation Honors Gala. And this is, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. This is a black event, and he is speaking to the black community. Listen to this clip.
And then I got indicted a second time, and a third time, and a fourth time. And a lot of people said that that's why the black people like me, because they have been hurt so badly and discriminated against. And they actually viewed me as I'm being discriminated against. It's been pretty amazing.
So listen, I'm not a pearl clutcher. I am willing to give Trump the benefit of the doubt that he's just riffing here. But he's speaking to a black audience, and he's telling them that maybe the reason so many black people like me and relate to me is because I, too, have been charged with felonies and treated unfairly by the justice system. That's like way more offensive than saying low SAT scores. Black people can relate to being charged with crimes. And obviously I'm caricaturing, I'm making fun of this a little bit, but it's if you're going to be honest and outraged and condemn Gavin Newsom for, again, it wasn't even a comment to a black audience, but say he had made the comment the way it was originally presented, I feel like you would have to be fair and say that something like this is equally, if not more offensive, just in the spirit of consistency at all. Because how could you claim that it's so deeply offensive and racist and disqualifying and career ending to say, I'm just like you to black people because I have a low SAT score, which, again, like I said, that would absolutely be a very racially obnoxious and insensitive and offensive thing to say. But how could you be mad about that and not mad about Trump? And he's actually said this on multiple occasions. It wasn't even a one-off, telling black people, like, or saying about black people, yeah, they relate to me because I too got charged with felonies and got treated unfairly by the justice system. Again, like, I'm not even particularly scandalized by that because Trump just says stuff and just yaps and just riffs. And I don't know, it's just the way he is, better or worse. But if we're going to be consistent here, I don't know. It seems to me like those is a pretty big double standard there. And I really don't appreciate that. I really think people need to have standards. And if you just apply them in one direction, you don't have a standard at all. Like, and at the end of the day, the whole racism accusation against Newsom seems to me to be absolute BS. And I'm more concerned. I mean, I'm concerned by what I see as the hypocrisy here, but I'm actually most concerned, I would say, by the fact that so many people seem to just uncritically accept and take at face value viral clips from hyper-partisan and hyper-ideological anonymous Twitter accounts. And there's just like no fact-checking or due diligence, even from members of Congress. You had congressmen and senators getting up there and demanding Gavin Newsom's resignation as governor over this comment and relying on facts that they didn't verify and just saw on some random Twitter account. Is this really where we're at? Like, honestly, my biggest takeaway from this is that it seems like right-wing media and Republican politicians are increasingly consuming information from just viral clips with no context on Twitter posted by random anonymous ideological accounts. And that's like concerning. Even if you agree with these politicians and their opinions and values and perspectives, you should probably want them to have more due diligence and better sources than that. One other piece of this story I want to talk about is, and trust me, I have plenty of smoke for Gavin Newsom on this as well. Like, he has not covered himself in glory. Of course, his instant reaction, or at least his staff, was to cry ableism and say they're attacking the governor for having dyslexia. And that's not really what's happening here either, and it's not lost on me the extent to which they seem to be leaning into the dyslexia as some sort of, I don't know, intersectionality points or kind of sympathy story. It's like, I got nothing against anyone with a learning disability, but you shouldn't be milking it either. And it seems like Gavin Newsom is kind of milking it as a faux attempt to make him seem like a relatable everyman when he's actually like a privileged, wealthy celebrity power broker elite. It just, that comes off as very disingenuous. And then I have to say, I was very bothered to see this. I mean, part of Gavin Newsom's strategy is to be as aggressive and adversarial as possible and hostile in a political sense. So he's like trolling conservative media, and he's insulting Trump, and he's mocking people, and he's kind of echoing Trump's tendencies in some ways, the worst parts of it. And I really don't like that, but I understand it's a choice they made. But he kind of took it to an unprofessional new low. So essentially, a reporter from Real Clear Politics, which is a very popular news aggregator website that also publishes original content and reporting, and I say is probably right-leaning, right-coded in its political affiliation, but is used and consumed across the political spectrum. Well, a reporter for them, Susan Crabtree, she reached out to the official staff for Gavin Newsom's communications office as governor of California and got this very vulgar response. Let's listen, or let's look at this. So Susan posted on X, exclusive and breaking. What about that Gavin Newsom dyslexia diagnosis? Can the governor provide any paperwork related to his dyslexia diagnosis at any time of his life? Newsom's comms team just now tells me to off. That is a direct quote. Think Gavin Newsom's comms team is losing it today? And then she attached the email where she sent, and you can read the whole email if you want, she put it on social media, but she basically just said like, hey, can you provide me paperwork with this diagnosis from years ago, or some sort of, because Gavin says that he found out after his father died, and if so, I can share it with people on X who are claiming that he's faking the dyslexia. That's what Susan said. And to be clear, I actually don't think Gavin Newsom is faking the dyslexia. Frankly, I know people who have worked with him or reported closely on him dating back over a decade and have seen it firsthand. So I don't think that. But Izzy Garden, who is the communications director or one of the top comms people for Gavin Newsom and is paid by taxpayers, replied to Susan in an email, "Hey, Susan, thanks for reaching out. Respectfully, off. Izzy sent from iPhone." Is this really where we're at? Are we really pretending that this is acceptable or professional behavior? I think that is really disgraceful. You are paid by taxpayers. This is from a government email address, and that's how you are going to respond to a reporter making an inquiry about a serious news story and a claim the governor has made. Her email, I read the whole thing, was not insane or hostile, and if so, you have no obligation to respond at all. That is perfectly your right as a communications professional to decline to comment or simply delete and not answer a reporter. But to behave in this kind of nasty and unprofessional manner towards a reporter simply doing their job, it takes the trolling and the, kind of like edgy persona to a degree that I just think is totally unacceptable. And they say, well, Trump's acts the same way. I'm not sure that and obviously there's examples like Quiet Piggy and like another example I'll get into. I would feel similarly bothered if Trump personnel were replying to reporters like this. And I think if your pitch as Democrats is vote for us, we're just like Trump, then that's not actually a compelling or enticing pitch to anybody who's looking for an alternative to Trump. And mimicking the worst tendencies of your opponent is not, to me, a morally acceptable or viable response. That's my read on that. But I will tell you as well, there is a kind of similar analog here that I was also critical of at the time, where the Huffington Post, which is obviously like a left-wing blog, had made multiple serious press queries about a location of an event. And the White House here, I'll put this on screen, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responded, "Your mom did," to the reporter, and White House Communications Director Stephen Chung replied, "Your mom." Now, obviously, I think it's worse to like cuss and be vulgar and be so rude, but they're also being very unserious. And I think across the board, We should probably expect more dignity and seriousness and professionalism from taxpayer paid communications professionals for the most influential and powerful leaders in our country than whatever the hell it is that we're witnessing here. That is my apparently hot take for the day. Call me a boomer, call me a pearl clutcher, but I still have like some basic standards of civility and decorum, especially for taxpayer funded employees. I don't know. Y'all will have to let me know what you think in the comments about that one.